Thank you very much. Michael and I both hold PhDs in 20th century Australian literature, so that's probably a little different from the rest of the audience. And we teach in the English program. We'll be providing you with a short report rather than a fully researched paper about how we can use one of the features on Moodle to get our students to read the books on this slide. That's basically our job. And Brian just now said something really nicely and peacefully. He said, if you read it all and put the hours in, you'll get the benefit. Now, we all know that, of course, but unfortunately, our students often don't have the hours or they don't put them in. Is reading a problem in your classes? Are there people in the audience who feel that their students are struggling to read all the texts that they've set for the course? Or is it... Okay, so it's a problem we share with you, even though our texts may be a little different. It's clearly a cross-disciplinary problem. Our examples come from a range of courses that we're offering in the English program, from reading theory to first-year English to studies in the media. We're looking at first, second, and third-year experience, so hopefully there is something in this for you as well. As I said, this is a report from the classroom rather than a fully researched paper. However, we do have some theoretical footing or some research that underpins this. And this is the Reading Resilience Project, funded by the Australian Learning and Teaching Council, run by Associate Professor Roseanne Kennedy, a literary scholar from the ANU. And basically the structure of our talk will be that I'll be introducing this theory a little bit. Michael and I will share the practice, which seems to be missing in the middle, and then Michael will do a little bit of a summary on the responses that we've received from students and the kinds of observations that we've made. Is this working for us? What are the problems that they see? What are the problems that we see as we try to get students to put the hours in and read the books? The Reading Resilience Project was undertaken by a group of literary scholars across various Australian universities, including Monash, Flinders, UQ, and ANU. And they basically trialled their findings in various courses on life writing, 21st century writing, Australian literature, and so on and so forth. Their key outcome is a reading resilience toolkit. And we've brought some hard copies of that with us today, which is quite an interesting little toolkit. It contains summaries of their experiences, little notes on what they would do differently, were they to do certain things again, some more background reading, as well as all sorts of marking rubrics, which you might find interesting. If you don't want to take a hard copy, you can always hop online and download a PDF. These are free to use as long as you credit them. Now, what do they mean by reading resilience? Reading resilience is defined in their understanding as the capacity to undertake and discuss complex and demanding work of interpretation required by literary and rhetorical texts. But they've already found, as they were sharing their work, that teachers from other disciplines find that useful too. So this isn't just about those closed reading skills that some of you might have dreaded at school. What is the author trying to tell us? It's really about reading faster. It's about reading more thoughtfully with more stamina, if you like. So what they suggest are the following measures, the following activities, if you like. First up, reflection. One of their arguments is that students need to understand that reading is actually an active process, a real skill that they need to hone, just as much as they hone their writing skills. So get them to talk about their reading. There are little surveys in the toolkit, and there are also readings on reading, would you believe, that you can get your students to read and frame a discussion on their reading habits. Produce little reading guides to particularly complex texts. These can just be little blurbs, the kinds of things that will serve as a one-stop introduction to the text that they're meant to be reading, and that will stop them from looking that up elsewhere. Obviously, one of the big problems we face in the English department are all those little survival guides that are out there, the York Notes, and all these other little things that you can find online, and they're usually not very good, but that students will happily serve to find some orientation, really. So why don't we provide that for them? Regular reading tasks, and that'll be our subject today. Set them regular little tasks And what we've done in the English program is use the blogging function in Moodle to do that. And of course, with these tasks, also provide them with feedback that gives them guidance on their reading and how they are traveling. These regular reading tasks are basically sets of questions, for example, that you might set on a text, the kinds of tutorial questions that you might have anyway. You give these students in advance alongside the text that you want them to read. And these are the kinds of aims that you would be pursuing with those tasks. You'd enforce the message that the reading is really important in the course because they have to do it all the time. Yeah, at my gym it says motivation gets you started, habit gets you going. I think that's one of the true things that they say at this gym. You help students develop the habit of completing their reading. We feel, or we have heard from some students, that they actually find it easier to get through when they've been given these little tasks. And of course, you also produce writing already, well before your essays. And Michael will tell you a little bit about how we have done this in the English program. Of course, this is nothing new. Some of you may have grown up with professors who wanted the sheet of notes before the tutorial. And this is really an electronic version of the sheets of notes with all the extra little gimmicks that you might be able to add and that students will enjoy.
Okay, thank you, Christina. I want to start with what we did last semester. Nicole Moore, Associate Professor Nicole Moore and myself co-convened a large first-year English called English 1B. And we wanted to use these reading tasks as a way to teach reading as a practice and the kind of points that Christina was making just then. We start out in this course with Henry IV and Henry V, which is quite difficult material for first-year students. And often the case is that they'll try and start this reading and just give up. So this is a way, this kind of online blogging stuff is a way for the students to be able to keep that reading up and kind of master the reading in a way that gives them confidence to go on throughout the semester. The blog task that we set was a 200-word online written response to a number of questions that we set each week. We closed the ability to blog before the tutorials so that everyone had blogged before the tutorials. The assessment task was worth 20% of the grade overall, and it was, it was used to teach this kind of effective reading skills. This is kind of the questions that we used. In week 10, The Kite Runner was the novel that we were studying. And these are the examples of the responses that the students came up with in this particular week 10. As I said, we in this first year we used particular questions and a structured reading task, and we marked it 3 times a semester. And we marked it quite heavily on grammar and written prose style as well as content as well. So it was quite a structured task. I think training them at this first year in these ways to read and read consistently over the semester allows us to do different things in the third year. And I'm going to pass it back to Christina now, and I'll speak later about my reading theory course, which I'm running this semester. But that's just kind of a kind of little overview of the blogging tasks that we've been using in the first year particularly.
I'm currently teaching a class on the Victorians, and everyone in this room knows that this is a reading challenge. These are the big, big books from English literature. And what did I do to get them to read them? I'm basically using a very conservative approach here, pretty much modelled on what Michael and Nicole have been doing in first year, so building on that experience of blogging there. I'm using discussion forums with my set questions, and I'm getting students to choose 3 per week and to write a total of 250 words. Sometimes I will make one question compulsory, which I want everyone to think through, but most of the time people have a choice. And you can see that there's varying popularity. Yeah, my creative tasks have been by far the most popular. So I've gotten students to write the opening scene to the Jane Eyre movie And I've got some quite interesting responses that testify to their engagement with the text, only in a slightly different mode. So I can still get a lot out of that and a lot of discussion material for tutorials, even by setting some more playful and fun exercises. And I think this allows us to do that and to get students to choose and navigate their way through a text using different questions. So it also gives some independence back to the students. Speaking of independence, my students will be taking over the teaching after the break. So they've chosen their texts to finish the class with. And they will be doing the usual presentations, but also some group activities. And they will be asking the blog questions, something I'm looking forward to. And I can't report on how that's going because that's only about to happen. But I think that'll be an interesting experience to see what use they make of the blog questions and what kinds of discussions they want to generate in their tutorials. And my other course that I'm teaching at the moment is Studies in the Media. And this is where I'm again using a fairly conservative approach because I'm trying to communicate to students that this is still work. It's not all about surfing the net and being on Facebook. So I'm using blog posts to get them to think about their secondary reading and read for the gist, something a lot of them find quite hard. So simple questions such as how does X define Y cause a lot of problems still. For viewing tasks, so for close reading of other material, for example, in the documentary that we've been watching, and also for small research projects that I want them to do independently and to bring back into the tutorial. So one of their assignments was to follow one Twitter user of their choice, and they made some interesting choices from the Dalai Lama to Kevin Rudd, and to analyze their tweeting behaviour and to gauge their audiences. And again, this allowed them to give the freedom to choose their own little project and to report back on that as they wished. Michael is taking the blogs into quite a different direction with his reading theory group.
Yeah, my reading theory course is really an applied methodological course in English. And I decided at the start, not as an experiment, not to set a kind of structured response to questions and just let them do a kind of creative blog. And it's working quite well. They're getting into it. I bring the Moodle side up, but it might take a bit too long. So it allows the third year students to be more creative with their blogging, incorporating a lot of different materials, pictures, GIFs, all that sort of stuff. And they are just enjoying it so much. There's no formal style, and you know, it's a creative response to these set readings. It's a really free for all, and I can understand at first year that we need to have a quite structured, formal kind of response to questions to allow them to develop those skills. But I think at the later year, as Christina and I were talking about yesterday, this kind of blogging task can go in multiple directions, which I think is very helpful for learning. And I'm just going to speak a little bit about the kind of evaluations of this. First of all, I did a survey in my class the other day, and most of the students gave positive feedback on the blogging material. They did say that they thought that it helped with their reading, that it forced them to do the reading each week, which sometimes they often perhaps bypass. What do you like most about the blogging was one of the questions on this survey. You know, you can't really read that, but it says the informality of it. The second kind of response is the open format, the pictures. Some are funny. This is the open format of the blogging. But there was a kind of a minority report which suggested that set questions were a better way to do this assessment task. In Studies in the Media, which is Christina's class, blogging has 5 questions and you can answer 3. This means that in tutorials, individuals can discuss this answer and not everyone just putting up the chapter into their own words. So there is pluses and minuses of this open way to do it. This is the same response. I find the writing hard to understand by itself. This is quite a heavy literary theory. The lectures and tutorials give more meaning, context and understanding that the readings will then, I think it's contemplate or at least give meaning to what I am reading. It would be better if the blogs were at the end of the week. I can understand that the material is quite difficult, and that there might be a little bit of an intimidation factor about putting your ideas up there before you kind of really understand the stuff that we go through in the lectures and material. Blogs shit me is a response that Christina got. So there are some people who don't like it particularly, but overall, I think that most of the students are getting a good kick out of it, and it's really helping with their reading consistently throughout the semester compared to other especially first year courses that I've taught at other universities. It seems that they are really doing the readings each week, which is it's an achievement in itself. This last final slide is just a question asked, what do you think helps most understand the material class? And the majority didn't say circle the blogging. It's still primarily lectures and tutorial discussion. And that goes back to some of the stuff that was discussed earlier this morning about the learning and teaching model still being necessary to have there. They get the most understanding out of the lectures and tutorial discussion. But that's not the point really. The blogging is about reading resilience and keeping them reading each week. Our evaluations, I'm not, too sure that it's helping in their writing abilities. Grammar, prose style is not kind of a high priority in this task. And it's possible, I think, that maybe we should come up with a different title rather than blogging, because sometimes it comes to reduce into this internet format where, you're using contractions and, LOLs and stuff like that. So it's possible maybe we should call it something different. There's a fast-paced idea about online communication. It's not a slow, considered way to respond to the text. So maybe there's a few problems in terms of writing. Another problem that we've thought of, which we haven't kind of experienced yet, is that it is a very difficult thing to mark for bigger courses, especially for tutors who are doing 2 to 4, large classes, maybe of 15 to 20 students. It takes a substantial amount of time to mark, which is a big problem. The Reading Resilience Toolkit does have a kind of rubric system in there, which we haven't implemented yet. But I know I've talked to some of the historians about this, and I think that's one of the major complaints is that it's taking a huge amount of time to kind of mark this stuff. On the positive side, I think the students love it. I think it gives them a creative expression, that they have something to say in class. There's not this the crickets kind of creaking in the class when they come to class. So everybody's got something to say, at least one thing to say. It does motivate them to get through the readings, I think. It's a control mechanism. Maybe the point is that it's harder for them not to do the readings as it was before. So they actually kind of have to do something. And the basic thing is that it helps tutorial discussion. Students have, got this stuff prepared at least, and they have something to say in class. And, it reduces the job of the tutor asking these kind of directed questions. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for your attention.